Hello, my name is Antonio Papano. I'm a patron of the Keyboard Charitable Trust. I was born in Britain. I've lived and studied in America and now divide my time mostly as music director of the Royal Opera House Covent Garden here in London and the Santa Cecilia Orchestra and Chorus in Rome. Music has no borders and the Keyboard Trust neither. Over its long history, it has presented young concert pianists of 34 different nationalities, offering them performing opportunities internationally and now globally by means of these internet broadcasts. All are ready to grace the great concert halls. I now invite you to hear them in conversation and in concert. Please remember their names, then ask the Keyboard Trust to send them to perform where you are. Then you too will have helped to accomplish our true mission. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Keyboard Charitable Trust podcasts. This program presents Evgeny Genchev in conversation with world-renowned list specialist and Keyboard Trust artistic director Dr. Leslie Howard. They discuss challenges of life as a musician, explore their favorite repertoire, and remember funny stories from their past. After the discussion, you can hear Evgeny play Scriabin Fantasie Opus 28, recorded at LSO St. Luke's in London. Enjoy.
So tell me, when did you first find out about the Keyboard Trust and how did you first start to play for us?
I think it was a couple of years ago when I first met Christopher Axworthy, and also later on I had reunited over drinks with Alexander Ullman, and he had just mentioned to me that he had a date at the Steinway Hall through the Keyboard Trust, so we thought that it would be a good idea if I apply as well.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Me too, absolutely.
Well, it's worked out very well, and it's very good to hear that things are moving along. It's a very hard profession to get into these days.
Absolutely.
I would hate to be 20. It was fun at the time, but it's now proving harder and harder. More and more people want to do it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. Well, there's not enough work out there, even for all the good ones. So
yes,
we need a thing like the Keyboard Trust in order to help make sure that the people that, we on the board of it, we see people who are really good. And in our small way, try and make sure that something comes of it, because it's actually very hard and it's very expensive to get into this business. And the stakes are high, because most people who want to play the piano for a living are really so well dedicated to that they haven't actually got anything to fall back on.
yes.
And as I'm sure you already know, there's a great many people who are out there teaching the piano who never intended to do so, and who aren't especially gifted at it. And you really don't want to add to that number.
No.
I mean, if you want to teach because you're a good teacher, that's a completely different question. And good teachers are like gold. Have you played for Noretta?
I have actually. Christopher Axworthy had arranged very cheekily for me to play through at his friend John, who is now 103 years old.
All right.
So I wanted to play through a program, and I had been just revising it for a week, basically. He said, "Oh, we will just come and hear it with John, and at her house it's gonna be lovely." And then it turned out he had brought Noretta and John, and I had
That's
been
very
revising
good.
it just for a week. And it was something with Brahms Paganini variations. And it wasn't. I was a bit upset, because Norette had been listening to Michelangelo play it live, probably. So.
Well, of course, but that doesn't matter. when you go out and play it on a stage, you always have to imagine that the 6 people you're most frightened of playing to are all in the front row.
Right.
Well, because one of these days they will be, you know, just when you least expect it. I remember I did a Wigmore once and only found out afterwards that John Ogden and Maurizio Pollini were both in the audience.
At least you found out after that.
And the first time I played in Queen Elizabeth Hall, Brendel was in the audience and came backstage afterwards with copies of all the scores that I'd been playing from.
Like you see in bar 302.
And fortunately, he was very nice. We became very good friends. But if I'd known he was there before, I would have felt very strange. But you've just got to. It is going to happen sooner or later that somebody of that caliber is going to be out there. But remember that they're there because they want to hear you and they want to hear you play well. But playing for Noretta is a terrific experience. I first played for her 44 years ago. And she's not an academic teacher in any way, but she's got this really uncanny ability to say, "My darling, I think that is a little bit boring." and you know, she always pulled me up about the things that I didn't think about, which was, you know, proper communication.
Yes.
She trusted me to know that it should be a B flat in bar 37 because I'd looked at the manuscript, because that's the sort of thing I do. But while I was busy doing that, I was actually neglecting the audiences over there. Play to them, son. You know that.
So very constructive.
Well, no, she was terrific at that. And
I remember she commented after my Steinway Hall recital. It was all very constructive comments that I could then use and think about in future performances. Because sometimes you get caught up in other things and you forget the things that may be common sense, but it's good to be reminded of.
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because especially if you're preparing a piece that's renowned for being technically demanding, that's really unimportant in the end, because you have to get the technique behind the piece, and then you have to play the piece.
Absolutely.
I would hate to tell you the number of times I've heard the Brahms Paganini variations played absolutely like a bunch of exercises, and it turns out to be a distressingly awful piece to listen to if you do that with it.
I couldn't agree more.
And well, this often happens, as you expect, when people are obliged to play 2 Chopin etudes for a competition. Yeah. And they forget that they're, whatever else they are, they're musical poems. And if you can't make them poetic, don't play them. You know, you can do that. You can even make a Czerny study poetic if you.
Some of them are quite nice. Actually, at some point I even had an idea that maybe I can play a section of them in a concert. A bit silly, but I mean, I think some of them actually quite charming, and I would love to play them at least at some point. I like.
Well, it works very well. I quite like Czerny all along, but just because I play a lot of Beethoven and a lot of Liszt, and he's a useful connecting point between them, because he was taught by the one and he taught the other. And Liszt revered him as a teacher all his life, always spoke extremely well of him. And the dedication on the 1837 studies, and then on the revised version for the Transcendental Studies, it's to my dear master. It's a real act of homage. But to play a little encore by Czerny to connect Beethoven and Liszt together, and no one ever knows what it is.
Exactly.
They just don't recognize them if you actually play them as proper pieces. But this is good, and it also means that you're giving repertoire a bit of a serious thought.
Yes.
because the number of recitals that you can go to that just sound like young people's last competition programs is, well, it's distressing, because most competition programs do not make concert programs.
No.
They just don't. I mean, all the pieces are good. You know, we're blessed with the most amazingly large repertoire of fantastic music, and yet there's not really much investigation goes on from some players, because I think it's partly because they're stuck being obliged to play things for competitions. But competitions where you have a freer choice of repertoire, I think, are much better. If you sit on a panel and you hear a bunch of players, you can make a judgment, even if they only play Granados. And there's nothing wrong with Granados whatsoever, but he's very seldom set as an official composer for a competition. And or you could play Grieg. There's all sorts of composers that just don't crop up. And then there are these other pieces that crop up every week from everybody. And you get to where you really don't want to hear them anymore. And that's a pity. You know, it's not Mussorgsky's fault that everybody plays pictures, and not very well. But it's just one of those pieces that's used and abused, you know.
Yes.
And there are cycles of it. The Liszt Sonata used to crop up at the Wigmore once a week.
I remember, because at the Royal Academy of Music, I would walk on the second floor, the piano floor, and then there would be, every second room there would be Liszt Sonata, and then every other room there would be Rachmaninoff Sonata or something like that, or Gaspard Delannoy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, these are pieces everyone should learn.
Absolutely.
But you know, look in volume 2 or volume 3. Go to the library and look at the shelf and see how long it is. When you know that Liszt wrote 1,400 pieces for the piano, you don't have to play all of them, I promise you. But it would be nice to know more than 3 before you played the sonata, you know. And there are some terrific pieces that just don't get heard by all sorts of composers.
Yes.
I remember hearing Aldo Ciccolini years ago do a whole recital of Rossini. And that's just scratching the surface. Rossini wrote over 200 things for the piano. And very good they are. And he also did a whole recital, back before anyone played it, of Erik Satie. And in between he played all the standard repertoire as well, but he just pushed the boundaries and had a look. These days a lot of people play Alcon. When I was a kid, only Raymond Lewenthal and Ronald Smith. But you know, this is a repertoire which repays every minute you spend looking at it. And we're lucky, because we don't have to play any muck, but we can be inventive and a bit more courageous, I think. Just silly little questions, but people will always want to know the answer to them. Desert Island Piano Concerto?
No idea, really. I mean, I've never had a dish say that it's favorite, or a piece that it's a particular favorite. So I would need to have a desert island with a Wi-Fi to download them as it comes. But that being said, I mean, could be Brahms, it could be Rachmaninoff, Beethoven 4 maybe. Haven't played it yet, but
well,
it's enough to explore for the.
That's up on the list of the things that you'd most like to be asked to play that you haven't played yet, is it?
Brahms concerto. Well, I've played the first one. I would love to play the second, but I haven't had the chance to learn it or be asked for it.
Well,
I've played the third and fifth of Beethoven, so I thought the fourth would be.
Yeah, would do no harm.
Exactly.
Yeah. But well, I know mine, because it just is. It's that one. Mozart 459. It's my absolute favourite concerto of all time.
503.
503 is pretty tremendous, isn't it?
I love 503. Yeah, it's my favorite.
Well, that's how it goes.
Why
But
not?
but we're very lucky, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, if you play the trombone,
Nothing against the trombone. I actually love the trombone.
you know,
No.
Rimsky-Korsakov concerto for the trombone.
No.
Oh, well, a little winner. 15 minutes of complete joy.
Well.
But then that's the end of the list of the 19th century romantic trombone concertos. We're very lucky, and you know, just to play any Mozart concerto is an honor. And
I was actually discussing with Alex after last week's, actually in the interval of Vengerov's recital at Barbican last week, and we thought about the violin sonatas that Beethoven has written, and I thought it's such a pity that actually unless violinists get familiar with the quartet, with the late quartets, they actually never experience mid or late Beethoven, because it goes out only up to
apart from it was 96,
yeah.
but which is a fantastic piece, of course. But no, you're right, and
They think of Kreutzer, oh, that's as if it's late Beethoven, but actually it's still early period, sort of.
it's right in the middle. But indeed, the concerto is much later than that. But that's the best thing. That's the best concerto as well.
Well, there's only just the one.
No, but it's the
What do you
best
mean?
concerto for any instrument that Beethoven wrote. It's better than the piano concertos in several particulars, but it's you can play the piano version of it. If you're
Yes,
busting.
exactly.
It's not quite the same
Well,
to
never.
play. But you do have the cadenzas, and the cadenzas are amazingly good. And to introduce the drums into the cadenza in the first movement, it's a stroke of genius that only somebody like Beethoven could have had, which is why some violinists want to transcribe those cadenzas back for the fiddle, so that they can play with the drums. It's very important. And where would you like to play that you haven't played yet?
As in,
Country or place or hall or anything?
well, I've played in the States, in Mexico, in Australia, but still, I would love to visit again and again. Of course, it's a wonderful place, and explore different halls. Obviously, I haven't been to some. To Austria, I recently once, but it depends also on the venue. I would love to have the chance to play with some good orchestras in a good venue.
Oh,
Like, Musikverein or Berlin.
well, that's the most fantastic hall for sound anywhere. But sometimes the venue, it makes a lot of difference, and it makes sometimes a difference the way you play. If you, speaking from the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, for example, it's like playing at La Scala, except that every dimension is double. And it's just a mighty experience. Or the Bellas Artes in Mexico City, where you go in and you play a recital and there are 3,200 people in the audience. This is not something you experience in Europe very often. It's really quite alarming. Playing at the Albert Hall is a bit like that too, because you can have several thousand people in there.
But it's exhilarating experience.
It is. It's also hot.
I can imagine.
Just about the hottest hall I've ever played in. Oh.
No, but it's also, I mean, these halls. I mean, I remember when I tried the piano at Gewandhaus in Leipzig. It was similar experience to, say, the one in Malezal, the small philharmonic in St. Petersburg, and it just would respond to any even thought of like a hint in, and it would be already audible in the sound. Very responsive piano. I mean, it's the acoustics. I mean, and the instrument normally tends to be quite exceptional in such places.
Good. Thank you.
Just looking forward to it.
It's been good to talk to you.